get myself right up on out of here. I feel like a disgrace, I'm not really what I appear. I go home to my girl and I make nicey nice. The fact that she don't know that I just put someone on. I don't like being here. I constantly live in fear. Could be gone at any time. When you live a life of crime, you have to face the music and do the time.
Welcome everyone to the season premiere of Mayhemtainment. I am your host JD, and I am joined by my executive producer Mizpah, and we have an amazing guest for you for our season premiere, a real get, as I will call her, Taylor Kitchen from Above the Yellow Line. It's her own show. It covers NASCAR. She's excellent. She's very knowledgeable, and she knows what she's talking about. So make sure you check her out. You'll be seeing on the tickers everywhere you can find her, all her outlets. So make sure you look for those and then check her out. And I'll also go over them at the end of the show. Taylor, welcome to the season premiere of Mayhemtainment.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on our very small show because you are much larger than we are. So I appreciate it as well. Now we're going to talk NASCAR here in our season premiere. We haven't done a whole lot of NASCAR episodes. We'd like to do more. Mizpah here keeps pushing me to do more NASCAR episodes. I don't get to watch as much as I'd like. So for this one, we're just going to get to know you a little bit. Who's your favorite driver currently and all time?
Yeah, so currently, I would say I like how Ryan Blaney interacts with his fans. I like how he interacts with media. He's somebody who sticks out to me for sure. And of all time, I've gotten into the sport pretty recently and I've learned pretty quickly. But there was an episode of the Dale Jr. Download where he had Terry Labonte on, and I just fell in love with Terry. A lot of my collection that I have in the background here is like just Terry die casts and things like that. So I would say Blaney and Terry Labonte for sure.
Terry Labonte, excellent, old school on that one. Yeah, and him, and my favorite is Dale Earnhardt Sr., of course, the Intimidator. And Terry Labonte and Dale Sr. had some classic battles in the 90s.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
And Ryan Blaney, I don't know much about him, but he seems pretty good. Mizpah, do you have opinions on Ryan Blaney? Do you know him? Or
I do like how Ryan Blaney interacts with his fans. He seems pretty down to earth with any of the interviews I've seen with him. So I would say he's a good driver. My current favorite though is Chase Elliott.
Oh yes, yeah, Elliott's good. He's good. The people's champ right now, as we call him. So that's awesome.
Chase Elliott, yeah. Yeah.
My favorite all-time driver is also Dale Sr.
That's a good pick.
Yeah, we're both. That's one area. The only sport I think we do agree on is in racing. We're both Dale Sr. fans. Any other sport, we're definitely on. We usually have bitter enemies when it comes to.
You gotta have enemies though. You gotta have enemies sometimes in sports.
Yeah. And Dale Earnhardt certainly made his share of those.
Dale Sr. once said, whether they were cheering him or booing him, at least they knew who he was.
Exactly.
Yeah. You said you haven't been a fan for that long. How long have you, in fact, been a fan? You said you got into it recently. How recent?
Yeah, so 2016 is when I kind of just first dipped my toe into the NASCAR world. And then 2017, I went to my first race. And from there, I was hooked. And then I really started working in the industry. 2021 and last year is when everything just kind of blew up. So very recent. But loving it a lot.
Yeah, you must have done your fair share of research and watch some of the old school stuff as well, because I saw some of your episodes and you're very knowledgeable for only getting into it in 2015.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely, the history is something I'm continuing to learn because it's a long history. We're in 75 years of NASCAR. I know some sports have been around long before that, but it's a rich history. And I think the sport does a really good job of honoring that, especially this season too. So learning a lot still during the off season, definitely diving into it. But yeah, the knowledge is crazy.
Yeah. Turning to, you said we were talking about old racing and some new racing. Do you have a preference on the old cars or the new cars, or do you still learning a little bit about the old cars since you're getting into it recent?
So I'm really keen on like Gen 4 and above. This new car that we have is the Gen 7. It was introduced last year and it has more of a composite body and single source parts, which means that these teams don't really have a lot of creativity when it comes to things with the
Yeah.
cars in the past. You know, you're able to make some of your own parts, some ingenuity. For me though, I really became a fan when we had the Gen 6 car. So that's what I was really used to seeing. In terms of what I prefer though, from what I know in the history, I'm liking that Gen 5, the car of tomorrow. There were more safety advancements. It was more symmetrical, a larger rear wing. It came right after the Twisted Sister era of the car, which was the Gen 4, where we just had some funky body designs, which was great. But I like the racing more with the Gen 5 and Gen 6.
See, I think that we'll disagree there with that, because I like the new car that we have. I feel like it brought back some more of the raceability for the drivers. And I really like the old style car going definitely pre car of tomorrow. Because I felt like there was more raceability there. If you go back through and watch some old races back in like Dale Sr., Terry Labonte time, you'll see the cars dancing around the track, and there's definitely a lot more driver control there. In my opinion, with the car of tomorrow, it just kind of looked like they were more or less, some of the tracks they were just kind of riding around, like they really couldn't push or have any real advantage.
And jumping onto that too, with this Gen 7 car, those issues are multiplied by 1,000. And I think it's the aero package that we have. We need more horsepower. But I will agree with you for sure. You know, the raceability with these newer generation cars, not as great as what we saw in the past. So I am on the same page with you there too. And I will say more iconic moments in the past as well.
Yeah, I'm also a fan of. Go ahead, Ms. Pop.
I actually had felt like we started heading in the right direction with this newest car.
I'm also a fan of the older school cars, definitely the 90s. I'd say as soon as they started labeling the Gen cars is when I kind of was like, you know, I didn't really like the wing on the back. That as soon as they added the wing on the back, I was kind of like, what is this? These are not imports here. Well, I guess one of the companies are, but you know, they're supposed to be American muscle. At least that's what it's always been. I like the way the old cars looked, and I agree with Ms. Pa that the drivers played, I think, more of a role in the past than they necessarily do now.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
From a safety standpoint, though, the safety definitely is phenomenal with the cars now.
Yes.
True. That was definitely something that anything that they did to the car that made it safer, I was all for. It's, you know, you don't want what's happened to some of the drivers, you know, Dale Earnhardt included, Adam Petty, to happen to others. So anything that you can do to make them safer, absolutely. So Taylor, what are your thoughts on turning NASCAR into other sports with the postseason, separating races into segments?
It's such, I have a mixed bag of feelings with it because there's so many facets to sports. You have the entertainment side and the competition side. And sometimes I feel like with what we're doing with NASCAR now, with this playoff format that we have that has evolved over the past several years, we lean more towards entertainment than we do the competition. And that can get really dangerous and you can feel like it's a little bit more manufactured. But I will say though, with this playoff format that we have right now, where it's like, as soon as you get a win, you're into the playoffs. This year, we changed the rule where regardless of where you are in points, you get into the playoffs, whether you have a win. I mean, if you have a win. So it brings in more fans that way because it keeps the intensity up. But I also feel like I like kind of the old school style of racing where we just kind of did a points championship. Whoever was the best throughout the entire season got it. I did like, though, the early format of the chase, like 2004 to 2006, where we took the 10 best drivers. We reset the points, and then from there, you just race for a championship. That would be the best format, in my opinion, where it was less gimmicky if you still want to have a playoff format. But what we have now, it's fine, but it's not my favorite.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I always preferred the across the whole season. You know, whoever was the best across the whole season is who should win the points championship. And if they wanted to make that more competitive, there's things that they could do to the points to make it more competitive throughout the season. I never understood the points, even though I preferred the points system through a whole season. I never really did understand how the points worked. You know, there was too many points awarded for different places, too many points differing from different positions. If there's 43 cars on the track, first should get 43 points, last should get 1 point, and there you go. It's pretty simple, and it would also keep it very competitive. You could still have your bonus points if you wanted to for leading a lap or leading the most laps, if they still have those. Honestly, I'm a little out of touch on the rules of NASCAR because I haven't gotten to watch as much of it as I'd like to. But and also, you know, I mean, you know, Dale Jr. is gone now. It's hard for me because I don't have a driver either right now. You know,
I will say the biggest issue I think in NASCAR right now too for the Cup Series is there's not a lot of personality. Like respectfully, our drivers are fantastic and some of them have good personalities, but it's a matter of them just bringing them out. I think too, our most popular driver, Chase Elliott, who actually I was a fan of when I got into the sport. That's kind of that was my segue into NASCAR a little bit. Was the first race I watched. He was doing great things. It was a Texas night race, but he's kind of personality-less necessarily, but when he has personality, it's like during these really big moments. Like I'm thinking him and Kevin Harvick, their battles like last year, previous seasons, and he'll kind of get snarky or he'll have the Merry Christmas or Merry off-season and Happy Christmas comment that's iconic. So he'll have sparks here and there, but if you're the most popular driver, I want to see more personality. But that's also Chase Elliott, very likable guy. But it's hard to find a new favorite driver now, especially with all these young guns coming into the sport, the changing of the guard. So I get that. I get that confusion.
This is the second changing of the guard that I've experienced, and Ms. Pa as well, as far as I knew. The young guns used to refer to, you know, Tony Stewart and Jeff Gordon and Kevin Harvick. You know what I mean? Those were the young guns. Now they're the old men, and we got a new generation coming in. If I had to pick a favorite driver, I would have to go with the final driver of the legacy of Dale Earnhardt. I would have to go with Martin Truex. You know, he's the last DEI driver, you know, left racing in NASCAR. So I think I would have to choose him if I were to choose a favorite driver. Ms. Pod, do you have a favorite?
Currently,
we already
covered that. It's Chase Elliott.
Oh, you're another Chase Elliott fan. Yes. Well, yeah. Chase Elliott, he's good. You know, I mean, he's absolutely good. Taylor, what are your thoughts on adding some other tracks? They've started to do that, and they added the dirt track, which I was also a fan of. I think maybe they need to add more dirt because it seemed like by the end of the race, they were racing on just, you know, dirty concrete there on the inside lane. But I like that they're trying new things, adding some new tracks.
Yeah, I think so. Unfortunately, the dirt track's going away for the Cup Series next season. So that kind of sucks because I was actually falling in love with it. I thought it was a really interesting point in our schedule. I just wish it wasn't a points paying race because it's so different. But next year, and the schedule should be announced, I believe the middle of this week is when it's expected. There's a lot of risks that NASCAR is taking. Of course, we went to the Chicago street course this year. We're getting into a different market, street course racing, which is not really NASCAR friendly per se, but it was interesting this year. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say about the road course racing quick. You know, they always used to race at Sears Point and Watkins Glen when Ms. Pa and I were younger and were really into the sport. And they were always slower. They were a little bit slower, but I think at this point, you know, I think they need to add some of these road courses. And I don't even think that they necessarily need to visit the same ones every year. I wouldn't mind if they had like 3 or 4 road courses and just changed every year and just did different road courses.
Yeah, and right now NASCAR is in a really weird limbo with that. We've added a lot more road courses. I mean, obviously Sonoma, Watkins Glen. We have Circuit of the Americas. We did have Road America, then that left. The Chicago street course is a street course we've added. But the package right now with this Gen 7 car kind of sucks, for lack of a better word, at these road courses and at the short tracks. But NASCAR's wanting to lean more towards road course racing because that's what the fans really want. So they're in a tricky spot. But I've grown to really like road course racing. It's something very different. And what NASCAR did this year, you know, we have the stage racing that they've introduced. They took the stages away for all of the road course races this year, except for one, to see if it helped the racing a little bit or hurt it. And then, of course, for this weekend at the Roval, the Charlotte road course that they have, they're putting the stages back in because NASCAR didn't like the racing that it produced without the stages. So
that's interesting. The stages for the road courses, that might be something. See, in the ovals, I think it's crap to slow everybody down and bunch them all back up. If there's someone out there just killing it, let them just kill it.
Yeah.
But in the road courses, because even an oval, you know what I mean? You're going to see passing, you're going to see racing somewhere. But a road course, the passing and the racing each other doesn't happen quite as frequently. So, the segments for a road course, I never thought about it for a road course. That might be where to keep the segments, keep the races broken into segments. I think they should get rid of them for the ovals completely.
I'm on the same page. I'd like to see them kind of scale back on the stage breaks for sure.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the segmenting of the races at all. I don't know. It almost seems like they're trying to appeal to people who have a 5-minute attention span.
Yeah.
Quite honestly. Oh, look, squirrel.
Yeah.
But I do like some aspects of the chase format. I like the aspect of drivers being knocked off and no longer eligible for the championship at certain points. That is something I do enjoy. Maybe we'll eventually get to somewhere that kind of resembles a little bit of the old school with a little bit of the new school, but I'm not very hopeful with that. And you bringing up the dirt track racing at Bristol, I thought that was awesome to watch. I enjoyed that myself. I would have liked to have seen them take a little bit of a different approach to that and reach out a little more to grassroots. The millions of dollars they spent to truck dirt in to cover Bristol in dirt, they could have used to rehab some old dirt tracks and race on those instead.
I thought about that. But this is what I was thinking. Think about what they did when they brought the dirt into Bristol. By the end of the race, the bottom lane, you could see where the tires were. The tires were basically on concrete. It was nothing more than dirty concrete at that point. So my concern is if they were on a real road or real dirt track, what would it look like? They're just going to dig holes. Eventually, you're just going to be grooves in the tracks if you're on a real dirt track. That's, I think, why they did it that way. So at least there was something hard for these heavy NASCARs to eventually hit. Because I think if you're just on dirt, I think you're going to have a lot of problems. I think on the very first green flag, you're going to have 1 or 2 cars who just dig a hole and are just, sitting in the dirt with their back wheels, and their front ends up is what I think. I thought about that too. And that's what I'm thinking why they didn't do that is because it would likely destroy whatever dirt track they went to, like completely.
I would agree with that. And I think for when we started the Bristol dirt kind of experiment versus where we're ending it, it was a rough start. Obviously, the first few times we went there, we had rain, which hurt the track. And then we had cars, just engines would die because there'd be too much mud kicked on the grill and it would overheat. There was too many issues. And I don't think it gave it a fair shot. But, as NASCAR learned, these races need to be at night, not during the daytime. That was lesson number 1. Second year, there was so much rain and mud. We learned, okay, hopefully we know the right conditions to race and the right conditions not to. But I think they also really consulted with our dirt drivers in the field in NASCAR currently as to how to make this racing better. And by this year, when we had our last Bristol Dirt event, I feel perfected it, at least for as much as they could have perfected it for these NASCAR cars. But sad to see it go. But I think it's something that they could venture into again in the future. It's just a matter of when and where.
Yeah, that would be nice. And like I said, I wouldn't even mind if they started doing, some of these, okay, so the next couple of years we won't get a dirt track and then they'll bring a dirt track back again, just like with the road courses. I think that's something NASCAR needs to look into is not having a set schedule. Oh, we're going to visit these tracks every year. These are the tracks we're going to visit. I mean, of course, don't get rid of staples like Talladega, Daytona, Bristol, Dover, Pocono. Some of these tracks are iconic. You don't want to get rid of them, but there's plenty of time in the schedule that you could add and bring in other stuff, I think.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's get to your opinions on actually let's talk about women in racing first before we get to the driver opinions here. I want to know your thoughts. You just recently got into it. you're a podcaster. You started a show about NASCAR. Were any of the female drivers, like, did they capture your attention? Did they have any inspiration to bring you in?
So funny enough, just with my journey with the sport, my grandma was the one that got me interested in NASCAR. But I never really had a focus on any of the female drivers. I knew Danica Patrick was around when I first got into the sport, but when she was still in the sport and like when she was leaving the sport, I was still very new to it. So I didn't really pay attention to her. And in that way, it kind of gave me a different perspective on women in motorsports. And I think I focused more on the media side of things, like Jamie Little and all the other women on that side of the sport that have really inspired me. Caitlin Vincey is another one, Heather DeBow. There's incredible women who are at the track week in, week out on that media side. And then this past year, I guess 2022, instead of podcasting or along with podcasting, I've been going to the track to report in person, which has been something very interesting as well. And seeing the number of women and men at the track. Usually it's me and like 2 other female reporters that are in the media center. So that's very different. But I don't know. I mean, there's a long way to go for women in motorsports. A lot more, I think, that others can do to be more accepting of it. But there are female racers coming through, if we want to talk about the racing side now, that are impressing me. Haley Deegan, Truck Series right now, she's maybe not doing the best, but she showed that she has what it takes in the K&N or ARCA Series. I'm hoping she gets a better opportunity next year. We got Tony Breidinger, who's making great results in ARCA right now and had her Truck Series debut this year. Even a younger driver that people don't know about that's not on the national scale right now, Emma Britt, she's doing Bandoleros racing at Atlanta Motor Speedway and just kind of all over the place. And she's fantastic. So there's hope for women. It's just in motorsports, it's just we need to be more accepting and just more open to it.
Well, I did some research on some of the women drivers last night, so that way I knew what I was talking about today. And everybody you mentioned, I looked up, and if they have your endorsement, because you pretty much said what I read about them. So if they have your endorsement, like I said, you know NASCAR pretty well. So, and yet there are some women coming up in the trucks and the lesser series. I hope that they can be successful. I wouldn't mind seeing more women in NASCAR. Ms. Pa?
So I feel like we are starting to head the right direction with that. If you get into your smaller, grassroots series, there are a lot more women drivers in those series and those events. And quite honestly, they're kicking butt.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of talent right there. And I think we will start seeing more of it and more people being accepting of it. And I think sometime we'll start seeing a more evenly distributed field of guys versus girls, and I think it'd be a great thing.
And I think the big thing to focus on too is we have so many talented women in these grassroots series, which is great. But how do we support them as they move through the higher ranks? Why is there a stop? Why do we not see as many women that are moving up? Again, we are making a difference. There's more women coming through, like ARCA going through trucks than ever before in the sport, which is great. But yeah, it's how do we support them? And I don't know if I have the right answer for that, especially because I'm not on the driver's side of things, but there's a good future for sure.
Yeah, let's talk about, before we move on to our the driver opinions, let's talk about like women in sports in general. They've really been making some big moves in all sports. I mean, even in professional wrestling, the women have been just crushing it in wrestling as well. I mean, and I just saw there was a woman played some downs in a college football game. I think it was 2 weeks ago or something. So women are really trying to, really get involved in all the sports. Really, I don't know if they'll be capable. I don't know how successful they'll be in all the sports, but it's. I think it's great. You know what I mean? If the women are willing to go head to head against the men, let them. You know what I mean? Let them. Chances are, some of those men are going to get their butts kicked.
A lot of my studies when I was in college, I did a lot of studies with social justice in sport and gender in sport. That was part of my minor that I did. And it really opened my eyes to the gap that there is. But it was really cool to learn more about, women in sports, what they're doing, whether it's on a national level or whether it's certain organizations like the NCAA and things like that, what they're doing to help women in sports. And even too, for me, the WNBA and the NBA and the difference between them right now, that's insane in terms of how they make their revenue. Same with the like USA women's soccer team versus the men's soccer team. So again, a long ways to go, but they are kicking butt. They're doing so well on a national and local level. It's really impressive to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I love seeing it. We'll definitely have to, we'll maybe have to have you on our sister show, the Boiling Point Podcast. Good segue for me to give them a plug. Our sister show, the Boiling Point Podcast, they handle politics, faith, world news, that type of thing. So wouldn't mind having you on that to discuss more in-depth women's sports issues, which we will not bring up here. And you know what, while we're doing this, visit our storefront, bonfire.com/store/JDEDESIGNz. That's with a Z at the end of it. And pick yourself up some apparel, new Mayhem Media apparel available in our storefront. So pick some up and support the show. Taylor, let's move on to your opinion on some different drivers. We're just going to go through some drivers here, and you just, give us your opinion on some of these drivers. And we're going to start right off. The first two, in my opinion, the best drivers of all time. What are your opinions on the King, Richard Petty?
I mean, it's hard to top the King. Any other driver, like, there's no one that compares. He's changed the sport. He's revolutionized the sport. His success, nobody is ever going to come close to the amount of wins that he has in his career. But also just a fun personality. And he's still in the sport too, in a way, with his team Legacy Motor Club. So he's still continuing to revolutionize the game, and he's kind of changing with the sport as well, which is cool to see. But as a driver, hands down, one of the best. Yeah,
he's like Burt Reynolds. He hasn't aged in 30 years.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. The next person would have to be, Ms. Pod, do you want to weigh in on the King?
One of the things I like about Richard Petty is, like, even now, he still has a level of determination about him.
Yeah.
I've actually heard stories about, he was in a wreck and he broke his leg, and NASCAR didn't want to let him back in the car unless he was able to perform, get out in a certain time frame and stuff like that. So one thing he did, he went home and actually cut his cast so that he could flex his ankle, which was broken,
Yeah.
to be able to drive the car, because he didn't want anyone else in it. And that just shows a level of determination that most people don't have. And I think that's one of the things that you have to be one of the greatest drivers, if not the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
We saw that with Dale Earnhardt as well.
That's number 2 on my list. The only person who I would say probably could compete with Richard Petty and his legacy would be Dale Earnhardt Sr. and his legacy. Taylor, what are your Dale Earnhardt Sr.?
Yeah, I was going to say too, kind of jumping off the injury story, Dale Sr., he broke his sternum or something like that. And he was still ready to race. Like, dude is impressive, true story of grit, and even too learning about his history and watching the old races of him. I mean, he captured an audience that I don't think has been captured in the sport since. There was such a loyal fan base to him, and he embodied what NASCAR was and what it is. And I think Dale Jr. is continuing to try to carry that through with his love of grassroots racing and history and what he's able to do. But obviously, Dale Earnhardt, one of the GOATs, 7-time champ as well. Just no one can top him, really. I said that about Petty, but Dale just had a legacy that is incredible.
Yeah, Richard Petty has a lot of wins. He's a great driver, but no one drives like Dale Earnhardt Sr. We have not seen anybody drive like Dale Earnhardt Sr. since him, and it's unlikely that we'll see anybody that'll drive like him ever.
Now, I will say something that is going to be a little controversial with JD here. I actually think Kyle Busch is very close to having the skills of Dale Earnhardt.
Let's get on. We got Kyle Busch coming up. He's down the list a little bit more. So let's wait till we get to Shrub in a minute, and I'll explain why I call him Shrub. So would it be safe to say, though, before we get to my next person, that Richard Petty and Dale Earnhardt, we can all concur that those two men are the GOATs. They are the GOATs.
Yeah, I would say top of the list, top 5 drivers for sure.
Ms. Paul, I don't want to talk to you at this point, so we're going to move on. All right, so let's move on.
I see where you're going with this, though. I see where you're going with this. I think I might be on
exactly. Yeah, you know where it's going here. So let's talk about the other so-called 7-time Cup champion, Jimmy Johnson. What are your opinions on him, Taylor?
I think, and there's this whole debate, just why don't we remember Jimmy Johnson as much as we remember the other 7-time champs? And I think it is his personality is a lot more docile. It's a lot more tame, it's a lot more mild, But in a way, and I don't want to say his championships are more impressive than Dale and than Richard Petty at all.
They're not. They're far less.
But he is the only driver to win 5 championships in a row in NASCAR, which is very impressive. Like, I don't think anyone else can do that ever. I mean, to his advantage, though, he had a generation of cars that I think allowed him to do that. He really perfected the generation of cars that he was in. But he's also, again, he's still trying to revolutionize the sport. He bought into Legacy Motor Club. He's a part team owner there now. Of course, towards the end of his career, though, that's when I really started to watch the sport. And that was very disappointing to see just the sparkle that I knew Jimmy Johnson had, the tenacity, the winning ways that he had. Never got to see it. So that really sucked. And then, of course, went to IndyCar, didn't do too hot there. He tried to do some one-offs last year, always wrecked out. So it was very disappointing. But I will say Jimmy Johnson has a legacy that I think we need to do a better job at pointing out, remembering. I would say he is technically one of the GOATs in terms of his championships and how dominant he was. I know. But I think it is just a lack of appreciation for Jimmy. I really do.
Ms. Paul, I'm going first. See, the thing is that I'm not of the opinion. I am against the both of you. I will be firmly against the both of you. I don't think his championships. I think during the sport, that was during a time when NASCAR was changing. They were changing a lot of stuff. I will give him credit for being able to stay on top of it more, but I think it was they were doing NASCAR was doing things, and I think that took away from his 5 championships. I think if you put him in any car before 2000. And he does not, even with the same racers, and he does not win 5 championships in a row.
And I will say, too, to top that, I think the competition back then was a little bit more stiff than what Jimmy Johnson was part of. And I will say, though, to kind of maybe counteract that, I feel like there was a lot more cheating you could do back then that you could get away with. The technology now, they scan the cars. They check everything. They check the measurements to the T. There's a lot less that you could get away with, but they found a way.
If you're claiming Dale Earnhardt cheated, I will refute you also. Now, Ms. Paul, go ahead and say your nonsense on Jimmy Johnson.
So, one thing about Jimmy that a lot of people don't realize is he was able to win championships in every format of the chase.
Yes, thank you. He played the game and won.
It shows adaptability. It shows that he was able to, do whatever he had to do to be able to get those championships. I will forever disagree with you, John, and I will say that Jimmy Johnson has earned the right to be on the top 3 podium of the greatest of all time.
Yeah, no. Sorry, that's just not how it works. I am the decider, and I decide things. This is my show, okay? This is my show. All right. Well, let's not get bogged down in whether or not Jimmy Johnson should be in the conversation of the GOATs. Of course, I am of the opinion that he is not. Listen, I don't mind if he's in the conversation. Let's just be clear. He did win 7 championships, 5 in a row. You can talk about the competition he had and the changes NASCAR was making, but he did do some stuff. So he should be in the conversation. I'll at least concede to that, but he does not. He gets number 3 at the very best. Okay, and that's on a good day. All right, so Jeff Gordon, Taylor.
I mean, talk about your top 3 or your Mount Rushmore of NASCAR. Jeff Gordon definitely makes a case there. Another great veteran driver, now has some stake at Hendrick Motorsports there, and he's in a role there to help with that team. Again, didn't really get to see him race a whole lot as I was coming into the sport, but I know a lot about him based on my friends, family, seeing some of the older races too. And it's hard to dispute. He is one of the best in the sport. But when we talk about our Mount Rushmores, he definitely is there, but I don't know if he's top 3. That's where I differ a little bit. But he also has a great personality too. Gotta say,
I actually started respecting Jeff Gordon later in his career. When he became the old man, I actually had some. I got some respect for him when he was the young kid. winning a bunch of races and championships. I definitely did not like it. Yeah. I was a Dale Earnhardt fan. So every time Dale spun him around, I was cheering. It didn't even matter if Dale won. If Jeff was in the wall, I was cheering. But then later in his career, I definitely got a little more respect for him. Like, man, he's been around. He's done a lot of stuff. He's had his struggles. So I think. I got some respect for him at the end. he could also be in the talks of the top, but I would, again, 3 or 4 at best, definitely.
Mhm.
So I would like to point out, if we would have continued the old style of racing and just kept it at points based, 2 of Jimmy Johnson's championships would have actually gone to Jeff Gordon, if not 3.
Yeah. See, like I
But
said,
with that being said, very early in Jeff Gordon's career, he was a big crybaby.
Oh yeah.
Then Dale Sr. actually had kind of taken him under his wing a little bit and was showing him some things and pointing things out to him and kind of really mentored him in a way. And you could see a change in him through just, like a 2 or 3 year period. You could really see a change in his demeanor, a change in his style of racing, just a change in him overall. But I mean, come on, you're getting a mentorship from Dale Sr., who's not going to change. And I think that is what brought him to the level that he is, because of the knowledge that he gained there.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's part of Hendrick Motorsports now is fantastic for Hendrick, on a ownership level there. And I look forward to seeing what he's able to do with that at once Hendrick, steps down or whatever happens there.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing that as well.
That'll be something when Hendrick steps down. That will be the end of an era of racing.
Absolutely.
Okay. Next on the list, we still got some time, right? Taylor, you're still all right on time?
Should still be good. Yep.
Okay. All right. Next on the list. All right. Let's talk about Shrub, Kyle Busch. All right. And the reason I call him Shrub is because he is the little Busch. He's the younger brother of Kurt, so he is the little. He is a Shrub. I am not a fan of Shrub. Sorry, Kyle, if you're watching this. Listen, you've done some things. Mad respect for what he's done. He's probably the closest thing we're ever going to see to a Dale Earnhardt in a car for likely a long time. I liked that he had the attitude, and I'm going to win races, and I don't really give a crap if you're in my way. If you're in my way, get out of my way. It was the same kind of attitude Dale Earnhardt had. He's just not as good. I don't think he was as good as his arrogance. He didn't have it to back it up, is what I'm trying to say. Sorry, Kyle, if you're watching. Big fan. You should come on the show. What are your thoughts on Kyle Busch, Taylor?
Yeah, so Kyle Busch is so polarizing in this sport, and obviously this year he moved to Chevy, racing for Richard Childress Racing, and it seemed to turn a leaf for a lot of people. It only took a manufacturing change to make people love Kyle Busch, and I don't know what it is. A lot of it was kind of a sad story per se that people latched onto with him losing M&M sponsorship. Going into this year, Jaguars Racing seemingly kicking him out, which working behind the scenes and marketing and things like that for the sport, for driver development companies, and also to just in general, we know that there's more happening behind the scenes than what meets the eye to the fan perspective. So I give relaxation to the whole situation. But for Kyle Busch, though, in my opinion, he is one of the best in this modern era of NASCAR. 2010 on up. He is a phenomenal race car driver. He has skills, or he just has a way about him that just other drivers don't have. He has, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but he just has a different driver mentality than a lot of other people have. And I think over the years he's matured, kind of like Kurt Busch. He started off as a complete just butt to everybody. And through his career, he's learned to, I don't want to say mellow out, but he's gained respect for those around him, for the media, for the sport, and even to his driving change. It's great to see that. Unfortunately, it was his last season last year, but he got a win. But for Kyle, though, speaking of Kyle more in particular, I do like him. I think he's a great driver. You cannot deny his talent. His ego is crazy. But in a way, I feel like he's kind of earned the right to have that ego.
And he is retired now, right? He officially retired from racing, isn't that right?
Kurt Busch retired officially. Kyle is still around and still kicking. He's in the championship fight right now.
Yeah. Okay. I thought, is this his last season? Did he announce that this is his last season?
No. So Kyle's still around. I think he signed an extension.
I'm gonna have to check out my sources on that. Then I could have sworn I saw something that said he was going to be finished after the season, but I'll have to check my sources on that. Maybe I read it wrong.
He did sell his truck team. So this
Oh,
is the
maybe
last
that's
year for
what it
his truck
was.
team.
Okay, all right, yeah, actually, that's probably what it was then. Okay, so he sold his truck team.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because they reached 100 wins, championship winning truck team, incredible. But I get the point where he is in his life with now he has 2 kids. He really wants to focus on his future at RCR. Like it's different for him now. So it sucks that the team's going away, but for Kyle in the long run with his son and him getting into racing now, I think it's for the best.
So you had said about it seemed like a manufacturer change was what helped people start liking Kyle Busch. I think it was more coincidental that the manufacturer change happened, and that's when people started liking him. I feel like his personality had started to change when he became a dad.
Yeah.
Kind of started to soften out a little bit and started not being so edgy and so controversial as often. And I think that started to warm people up to him. Plus, he started to build he had a history at that point. The man could drive the wheels off of anything. And people started seeing that. So with the change in mentality and the change in attitude and the history to back it up, people started saying, you know what, maybe we need to give him a chance. Maybe we need to stop, bashing him so hard. I'm still not a big fan, but I will admit that he's got a lot of talent.
Yes, I would agree with that as well. He does have a lot of talent, and it's another end of an age. I mean, who'd have thought? He's only ending his truck team, but Kyle Busch is one of the old men now. Really, I mean, it's hard to believe. I was a fan before there was any Busch in any racing. Next up, Kasey Kahne.
Yeah, so Kasey Kahne's a driver that I really saw towards the end of his career. I was there when he transitioned out of Hendrick Motorsports, and his last year of racing unfortunately ended. He had I don't know if it was a heat stroke that he suffered or some sort of heat illness, and he wasn't able to just get back in the car, and he's stepped away from NASCAR. He's doing some dirt racing or something like that. But I do know that he is a Crown Jewel king. He wins a lot of Crown Jewel races. He did have a period of time where he was doing significantly well, but I feel like at Hendrick Motorsports, there's always one driver that just doesn't stack up to the rest. And I feel like that was him a little bit. I do like his personality, and I like what he's all about. But I can't really say too much about Kasey Kahne because I'm not super familiar with his career outside of the bare minimum. But not a bad person, not a fantastic driver, but he got stuff done. He got some results and wins.
And I also think with Hendrick Motorsports, with their 4 and 5 car stables, I always felt that the 4th and 5th, whoever it was, no matter how good of a driver it was, they were the ones getting the hand-me-down parts.
Yeah.
Jeff and Jimmy got the top, and then whoever was third in line would get the whatever's, and then the 2 guys on the bottom would get whatever the parts were left. And it always seemed to be that way that, their cars did better. Even when you put a good driver in one of their 4th and 5th numbered cars, they were never as good as the top tier drivers or the teams that Hendrick really focused on.
And Hendrick has 2 different shops for their cars. So I don't remember who's with who, but they do have a shop with 2 cars and a shop with 2 other cars on their campus. So sometimes we might see the 2 cars that are in the same shop run really well while the other 2 cars don't some weekends. And sometimes it might be that might be the difference. And that might have been what it was previously, but also too, you had Stars and Jimmy Johnson and you had Stars and Jeff Gordon who were getting those wins as well.
Do you want to do Kasey Kahne, Ms. Paul, or do you mind if I move on?
I think in the interest of time, we can just keep moving on.
All right. Now I want to ask you, if we ever have you on the Boiling Point podcast, I'd love to ask you about Bubba Wallace again, but Bubba Wallace.
Yeah. So, I mean, this year he is on a tear through the playoffs. This is the best season that he's had statistically in his Cup Series career, and he's making it happen. I know some of him getting through the playoffs could be considered luck based on the misfortune of others, but he's also had a different mindset about him. He's very different. Even to I interviewed him at the track back at Michigan, and he seemed different. He was more confident in himself, more confident in his team. And they're running really well this season as a whole. Him and Tyler Reddick, who's in that other car at 2311 Racing. So Bubba Wallace, I don't think he's going to be winning a championship this year, but the fact that he has a chance to make it to the round of 8 versus where that team has been the past few years is quite incredible. I mean, he's determined, again, more confident than ever. He has a bit more lightness about him, but obviously too, he does deal with some anxiety. He deals with a lot of the pressure around him, whether it be societal, whether it just be in the garage to impress his team owners, Denny Hamlin, Michael Jordan. But I'm excited to see if he can make it past this round and go to the round of 8, because that would be awesome for him and that team.
Ms. Paul, do you have anything on Bubba Wallace?
I mean, I would just kind of mirror what Taylor said. You can see a change in attitude in Bubba Wallace. I think going to the 23 team there definitely was a good move for him. But as far as an opinion on him, I really don't have one way or the other. I think he's a good average driver, honestly.
Yeah, I don't. I'm going to save my opinion on Bubba Wallace. Dale Jr.
We all love Dale Jr. Like, I will say my grandma's not. She used to be a huge fan of Dale Jr. Now she doesn't like him. A lot of it has to just do with he's very opinionated, and that can be polarizing, I guess. I don't understand it, but I still adore her and love her.
He's getting into the podcasting now that he's done with NASCAR.
Yeah, but I mean, was he the best driver? No, I did like his Busch Series days of racing. Like that was fun. That was great. Come around to Cup Series later in his career, I guess late to career, not so much, but love what he's doing for the sport. He's changing the game, not necessarily as much as like 23XI and what Trackhouse is doing and kind of modernizing how you get sponsorships, how you brand your team. But Dale has been a staple in the sport and bettering it. He's brought North Wilkesboro back. He's hopefully probably in the works of bringing other historic tracks back to the sport. So he's merging that gap between the new and the old that NASCAR seems to be struggling with in terms of getting new fans, and even to getting in new partners to help longevity for the sport. There's a new TV deal that's going to hopefully be announced sometime soon. That happens in 2025. And so I think that gap helps. And what he's been able to do for NBC and his commentating and everything like that has also been great. And definitely modernizing the sport in terms of podcasts, like you said, as well. So giving the fans more insight has also been a positive to Dale. I think I categorize his career, in my eyes, more important in terms of what he did off the track versus what he did on the track. Not saying that it's less significant, but it definitely, I feel like he has more of an impact off the track that I've really appreciated and grown to love.
I would agree with that. He's definitely having a big impact off the track, I think, as well. Yeah,
absolutely. I definitely agree with that. On the track, I feel like once his dad had passed, his passion for racing kind of fizzled out a little bit. Like it became more of a job to him than a passion.
His focus shift too.
Yeah. I mean, you'd imagine that would happen. Yeah, I think that really hurt his career. I think honestly, probably should have took a year or two off. After his dad was in that accident, and just focused on himself and tried to find his love for racing again instead of trying to just work through it. Although when you have Dale Earnhardt Sr. as a dad, you don't really take time off from work to work out your feelings. You continue to go to work and you grind it out. So, it's a tough call either way. He probably did what he thought his dad wanted him to do, and likely that's probably what his dad wanted him to do. I'm going to skip a couple here based just for time. We hope to have Taylor on again. So, last two, Danica Patrick. You talked a little bit about her earlier.
So, because I'm a woman in motorsports, a female in motorsports, I appreciate what she's done. She's opened the doors for multiple people. She's mostly in IndyCar. I feel like she's made a lasting impression. She won one of the races in Japan in 2008, but I don't like her. I don't want to say I can't stand her, but just personality wise, I don't jive with her. I feel like she complained a lot, and just there was different ways where I wish she could have carried herself. I wish she would have carried herself a little differently, or she would have approached some situations a little differently. I'm thinking mostly like her approaching Denny Hamlin after one of the races, and she like grabbed him by the shirt. She's like, "Denny, like, what'd you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, Danica, no." But I can't deny though that she did pave the way for women in motorsports and made the road a little bit easier. But as a driver and just as a personality in the sport, I didn't really like her.
Not a fan. That's okay. I don't really know much about her, so I couldn't really talk about her personally, but I liked that she I like that she's, brought a lot of women to the sport. I think that was very good, and she definitely was a big part of the women. I think without her influence, I don't know if we'd have the next person that I'm going to ask you about, who you also talked about earlier, the number 13 in the Truck Series, Haley Deegan.
Yeah, I love Haley, and I think her and we also talked about too, like Tony Breidinger and other women in sports, even Natalie Decker. They are bringing in different partners to the sport. They're bringing in different eyes, which I think is really important. And Haley, like I said, she can drive. She's talented, but I think we're not seeing what she can do in truck. She's at one of the best truck teams right now, Thor Sport. They're actually based in Sandusky up in Ohio, where I am right now, not in Sandusky, but Ohio. And she has some of the best equipment, but she hasn't done anything with it. She got a great result at Talladega this past weekend, but otherwise, what else do we have from her? So I think, though, we saw her in Xfinity this season, and she got a fantastic result in her first Xfinity start. So my hope for her, and I'm thinking maybe she's going to have a full-time ride in Xfinity next year. I'm sure we'll find out in the next few days with silly season stuff coming out. But my hope is that she gets that Xfinity seat full-time, and she's able to actually show us what she can do, because I think she is fantastic for the sport. She has a great personality. She's very kind to her fans. She's fantastic. She's the full package in terms of driver personality and performance. She just has to put it all together.
Well, I definitely don't know much about her. Like I said, I looked her up when I was doing some of my research prepared for this episode. So I definitely, unfortunately, don't have an opinion on her yet. But from what I read, she seems to be hungry and seems to be doing pretty good. So I would love to be able to see a woman come into NASCAR and be successful in a way that's, Danica Patrick had her success, sure, but she didn't win any championships. Did she win a race, Danica Patrick?
In Cup, she never did.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I would love to see one of these women come up and be able to get some, not just a win, but get some wins and string them together and even compete for the championship. That's what I'd like to see. Ms. Paul?
I don't know a whole lot about Haley Deegan, other than what I've seen watching a couple of truck races. But what I've seen, I liked.
Yeah.
I watched her make some moves, that looked like veteran moves. And I'd like to see more of that.
I will say she's a very smart driver, and she can do great things. I think for her, sometimes it's situational awareness, and this is for a lot of some of the younger drivers too. But it's knowing when you're in a bad spot in the field, because she gets in calamity a lot, and a lot of times it's not her fault. It's not her doing. She just gets into wrecks that other people have caused around her, whether it be just a wrong move on the track or whether it be somebody trying to wreck somebody out of spite. But she is very smart. She's a very talented driver. It's just a matter of her kind of putting everything together.
So one thing that I would like to ask you, and I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball here because it wasn't on our list. You've had an opportunity to meet a lot of different drivers and sit down and talk with them. Did you have like preconceived notions of how somebody was going to be personality wise? And did any of them like have a completely opposite of what you perceived? Like who really kind of flipped the script on you there?
So I've never been asked that question before, so I love that. So thank you for asking that. Somebody I had a preconceived notion of before talking to them was Matt DiBenedetto. Truck Series driver right now. He's no longer with his team, so we'll hopefully have something about what he's doing next year sometime soon during the offseason. But he had some just controversial things on social media out the past few years that just, I think, rubbed a lot of fans the wrong way, and he was getting a lot of hate for it, and he was pushing back on it, and just it was a mess. And I was like, this guy's probably not super nice, going to be really just like standoffish, whatever. But I'm in Ohio. I met him last year. And literally, as I was walking by, he said, "Hey, my name's Matt." I'm like, "Oh my God, that's Matt DiBenedetto. He's introducing himself to me. That's great." And so we talked for a little bit. And I literally, the following day, I interviewed him on a golf cart heading back to his hauler. He was like, "Hey, I don't really have time. I only have time in between here and there on my golf cart." His PR guy was like, "Hey, just come with us and you can ask him questions." And he was so kind. And then after his interview, we talked about his dogs that he has at home, like really down to earth guy, totally shattered my expectations. I went and interviewed him this year again at Mid-Ohio, a fantastic interview. Took a lot of time to just talk to me through his season, how he feels with his team and everything like that. So he is somebody who definitely shattered my expectations for sure in a positive way.
That's awesome.
Excellent question, Ms. Pa. And that is why he is my executive producer. Make sure you follow Taylor Kitchen, creator of Above the Yellow Line. She is on Facebook. She is on YouTube. She is on Instagram. She is on Twitter. Am I missing anywhere else?
TikTok.
TikTok. Yes, I forgot TikTok because Mayhem is not on TikTok. We're not going to be on TikTok, but she is on TikTok. If you're on TikTok, follow her. You can also her Facebook page is definitely the easiest. If you're on Facebook, you can find all of her media outlets from her Facebook page, and on YouTube. Follow her on YouTube definitely, and make sure that when you do, you leave a comment and let her know that Mayhem Media sent you. Check out our storefront, bonfire.com/store/JDEDESIGNz. That's with a Z at the end of it. Pick up some new Mayhem Media apparel, support the show, and please leave us a comment for Taylor. We hope to have her on again, and hopefully next time we would like to make it a live episode. So leave a comment. We can always talk about it in the next episode. And we'd like to do more NASCAR episodes, which is also why we'd like to have Taylor on, because she's smart. She's much smarter than Ms. Pa and I put together. Trust me.
I'd just like to take a minute while John's breathing and thank you for giving us your time and taking time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you both for inviting me on. It was a fun conversation for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, we definitely want to have you on again. Follow us, Mayhem Media, on Rumble, YouTube, and Facebook. Just search Mayhem Media and you can find us. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave us a comment, and make sure you share out some of our content so we can continue to grow. For our very excellent guest, Taylor Kitchen, creator of Above the Yellow Line, my executive producer, Ms. Pa, I am your host, JD, and that's the end.
Good night.